Yeah.
Oh, you did go over to the champagne. I don't know if I've seen it.
How'd your wife make out walking out with her shoes?
Somebody, when we were walking around, they're like, "That's what you wore into the concert." I was like, "Shut up, lady."
You're not helping the cause.
I think she was fine after like 3 of those blueberry drinks.
Those were really good cocktails, though.
Yeah.
Those are really good cocktail.
Oh yeah.
But like getting an Uber was
You guys
impossible. Like,
Yeah, there's just not enough.
and so I had to call my neighbor. I called my neighbor. I was like, John.
all day.
I was like, man, I really hate to do this, but like we're stuck here pouring down rain. Like,
Oh really?
and he was like, dude, he's like, I'm just watching the Kentucky game. I'll come get you. And I was like, I'll give you whatever.
That's a solid. That's a solid neighbor.
Yeah. He came and got us. It was.
Is he an older guy? Or
Yeah, he's like 65.
Does he drink bourbon?
Yeah, he does.
Some bourbon pursuit picks might be coming his way.
Yeah, he's getting a bottle of Well at 12 because he can't ever find it. I was like, well, I'll just give you one.
Do me one favor. Like, try to just jam your cord in the bottom of this just so I can make sure I'm
Jam it in there.
Is there a way to check each mic?
Oh, actually, that's what it was. This thing was way too close to it, and that's what the static was. Okay, perfect.
Hello.
All right, we're just gonna do some quick audio tests. So, make sure everybody that's on Hangouts could just okay. Tony says we can hear us, so that's a good start.
Thanks,
so,
Tony.
I've gotten your
Awesome.
audio levels. I got mine.
So
Go ahead.
Live this whole time.
We're live right now.
Oh,
so we're
shit.
good.
Check.
warning.
Check.
Yeah.
Check.
Oh yeah, sorry guys, we're live. So
10 minutes ago.
yeah. So just kind of talk how you would as how close you're going to be to the mic.
Checking.
Keep talking.
Test.
Perfect.
Drinking all Kenny's bourbon.
Everybody is. Jordan already got you.
Okay.
I like bourbon.
Keep going.
I like
How was
bourbon.
Wild
I
Egg?
like bourbon.
Is that how close you're going to hold
I
it like that?
destroyed Wild Eggs.
Yeah.
Oh man, I was jealous when I saw that. I was like, ooh,
It was so good.
this place is so good.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Let's see. Jordan, you're set. Jordan, keep going.
Check. Are we good? Higher?
Yeah,
Lower?
that's good.
Good.
All right, Blake.
Hope everyone's watching the Jacksonville Jaguar games. If you could put updates in the
Into the
notes
chat.
section so I don't have to constantly look at my phone, that would be great.
Cool. All right. Well, I think we got quorum. We got audio. Sounds like everybody can
So
hear
we have
us.
some viewers. All right.
Yeah, we got 25 on right now. So this is great. I'll go ahead and it's not our first time. It's actually our first time doing it in person. Right?
It is.
Yeah.
This
This
is
is
In
cool.
studio.
This is really awkward.
Yeah.
This is, gonna be
This is
weird.
really awkward in
Yeah.
person.
We can just instantly stare at you instead of just.
I'm so uncomfortable to have other people in the room and talking to you
I'd
guys.
much rather look at you on a screen than face to face.
All right. Welcome back to the 24th edition of the Bourbon Community Roundtable. However, this one is going to be much different than any other one we did before because we all just happen to be here in Louisville for a particular concert, which we will talk about. And this is the first time we're doing it live. We're all here in person.
Yeah.
In studio.
Our internet friends
Internet friends
unite.
unite.
Yeah, right? Like
They do exist.
To the dismay of
This
our
is actually
lives.
the first roundtable I've worn pants for. So
Thank you for that.
Yeah, we do appreciate that.
and I'm wearing shorts.
And your broadband's pretty good right now too.
Yeah,
Best
yeah.
it's ever been.
The best internet I've had, and the only one who's not a screaming baby in the background.
So we'll kind of we'll do as we always do, right?
Yeah.
So Kenny and Ryan here from Bourbon Pursuit leading this on, but we've got the fellows from Breaking Bourbon right next to us too. So actually, this is the first time both of you have been on. You've probably done it once or twice before. Both of you have been
Maybe
on.
Maybe
once. I think we had to
once.
fill
Maybe
in for
once.
somebody missing
Yeah,
that one time.
Yeah.
but now we get both angles of it. So go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead. I'll start.
Pick us
So
both off.
I'm Nick. This is Jordan. We're 2 of the 3 guys behind Breaking Bourbon. And you can check us out online at breakingbourbon.com. Follow us on social media at Breaking Bourbon. Want to say thank you guys for hosting.
Yep.
Always
Yep.
fun. Always have a good time. I think that's the one thing about bourbon I really like. Because I was asking some people what they hate about bourbon yesterday at the thing we were at the festival. And, it kind of turned into the things we liked about bourbon. So this is really the thing I think I like the most about bourbon is like meeting people that this all kind of came together simply because of our mutual shared interest in bourbon. So glad to be here.
Absolutely.
On to me. I'm Blake.
Yeah,
from-
sorry. Game updates, right?
Yeah. No, I was trying to post it to the Facebook group. I'm Blake from bourboner.com. yeah, check me out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I feel like I don't have to give these out when we're all sitting in the same room, but no, happy to be here. So it's fun to actually do one of these in person.
Mm-hmm.
And just real quick, Quinn English. Yeah, you can tell your girlfriend that name will just stick throughout the rest of the show for Blake. It's okay.
And I'm Brian with Sip and Corn. Find me on mostly on Twitter, a little bit on Facebook. And November 1st is the release date for Bourbon Justice. It's on a 33% discount right now for pre-order on Amazon.
Super exciting.
Very
everybody get
excited.
it.
Super exciting.
Looking forward to it.
I
Thanks,
think we
guys.
all are.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So before we kicking off talking about, because we're all here for Bourbon Beyond, right? The reason why we're all sitting here today and
It's
we're not,
post-mortem.
yeah, it really
This
is.
is true. This is true.
What did we do wrong? But really, it was today. The second day actually got canceled. It was I don't know. It was almost it was like a fortunate of unfortunate things, right? Because like if it was going on today, like we would have gone.
We'd be there.
We'd powered through it, right? Because definitely wouldn't be there. I feel bad for these two guys over here that had sessions to be able to give today and workshops. And they're
I feel
got
bad for
canceled.
the audience too. They didn't get
Yeah,
to
that's
see
true.
That's true.
This is true.
I
That's
feel
why
bad.
we're doing this today
Right.
because
I feel
people
really bad about the
left out.
festival because they said they're refunding all the tickets and
Which-
all the vendors,
Which is
too,
great at the
you know.
festival. Which
Right,
is great at
for
the
sure.
organization, for sure.
But people still traveled here.
Yep.
And we
Yeah.
met people from Australia, from
This
Texas,
is true.
from all over.
It's a big event.
It was
a big
kind of a
event.
relief though when I woke up this morning. I was like, I saw that. I was like, oh, thank God. I can just.
Yeah, I don't know if people weren't there. People know obviously what happened, but the rain, it got so muddy. We were up to our ankles in mud yesterday. It was hard to move around.
Yeah, so for those that weren't there, this is a huge field in Louisville next to the river, and there was a solid, no joke, 4 inches of mud throughout the entire event by the end of the day. And it was one of those areas where your shoes were about to get sucked off each step you took.
and
Oh, I
the
lost.
thing is,
I lost
I think-
one.
Did
I,
you?
yeah, I had to like
definitely
go back and
almost-
fish it out. Yeah, it was pretty bad.
I don't think most people were prepared for that
No,
because the weather
no.
forecast said from like 3 to 6 there was like 30% chance of drizzle.
Up until that morning.
Well, it was not a drizzle.
A little
It
more
was-
than a drizzle.
It was like 4 inches of rain, and yeah,
and it was nonstop.
yeah.
I mean,
I mean, it was like Derby this year. It just never stopped raining.
It was pretty bad. However, I think the best part was how unprepared Blake came because he came and he's got his white Vineyard Vines
White.
polo on. So he's got his white polo on. And
Thought
then,
this
Blake
was a wet
Snips.
t-shirt contest that was
and then he's got his leather loafers. And I don't. Were they toss away? Like are they gone?
So it's a TBD on the leather loafers. I washed them off in the shower last night, and we'll see what happens when I get home. I like get room keeping to give me a plastic bag to pack them away in. So fingers crossed. Hopefully they survive. But
Tiffany's shoes did not. My wife's. I checked those as soon as we got home.
you got to tell everybody the backstory that doesn't know about it.
So, well,
tell
I
them
know
who
she's
Tiffany
not
is.
going to listen. To
Tell her.
this, so.
Tell us who Tiffany is too, right? So
Tiffany is my wife. She was coming to meet us at the event. I kind of texted her. I'm like, hey, it's really rainy, muddy. She call her on the phone. I'm like, probably want to wear your hunter boots. She was like, well, I've already left. Well, she shows up and she's like got these wedge sandals on and like wearing a skirt and no raincoat. And I'm like, oh God,
you're gonna have a bad time.
I'm fucked.
Yeah.
But no,
This is
she
not gonna
powered
go
through. At first, she was like, "Oh man, she about fell on the way there." But I think the blueberry brandy cocktails at the Bourbon and Beyond tent helped her embrace it a little
This
more.
is fair.
But
okay,
no,
but
it's-
before we get into more of the festival, right? I want to talk about Friday night,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So Blake, Ryan, and myself. So anybody that was hopefully been paying attention, right? We've been talking about this Art of Bourbon rare auction that was going on at the Speed Art Museum to benefit. That was also part of the Bourbon and Beyond. I guess you can say warm up, pre-party, whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And so we got one funny story out of it. But anybody that was not paying attention to some of the social media, there were some high dollar bottles that went off. Granted, it's all for charity, right? It's going to the right cause. For anybody that does want to know, that number 10 bottle of Pappy Van Winkle 23 actually sold for $19,500 back to Julian, right? So he ended up buying it back.
And
right?
this is the literal 10th bottle ever
Mhm.
bottled of Pappy 23. This isn't just like, the 10th year or 10th edition, the 10th bottle.
And
Right.
he already owns 1 through 9, right? So he had all 10. And
No,
Yeah.
actually.
No, he
so
gave-
1 through
Yeah.
5 was family. And then 6 through 10 was just
this guy who donated them. I don't think they're revealing the name. But
so Julian didn't donate it.
No,
he bought it.
He bought it back into the family.
He's
I
got to
see.
play by the same rules as the rest of us. It's hard to get those old
I
bottles.
couldn't tell if he pulled the Sazerac credit card or the Van Winkle credit card. I was trying to get a name on that one, but just kidding.
Do you want to tell your story about how one time you
Yeah,
actually
so
got to hold this bottle?
I'm actually didn't even get to hold it because it never came up here. I'm really bitter about this one because about 4 years ago, the guy who subsequently donated the bottles emailed me through Bourboner and was like, "Hey, I've got these bottles. You're interested?" And we're looking back at pictures. He wanted $4,500 for 3 of these bottles, and one of them being the 10th. Yeah, so
All right.
a little over whatever the math is, 70 or my brain's dead. So 1,400 a piece.
Okay, yeah.
Hopefully
So-
you're not his accountant.
Yeah. I use a calculator. We're good. No, so about 1,400 a piece. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm going to do this. And then all of a sudden it's like, if I spend $4,500 on bourbon, my wife literally will kill me. Like, I can't do this for 3 bottles, and ended up backing out. And now looking back, that one bottle went for $19,000. So it's kind of like, well, maybe that would have been a decent investment.
Yeah,
right.
hindsight's 2020.
Yeah.
Don't be too hard on yourself.
No,
Right. But that was one funny story, but here's another funny story. So I kind of wish, so Fred was going to actually join us today, but he couldn't. He actually had to just leave to go back on site. But I kind of want to get his perspective from his viewpoint angle. So this is sort of how it went down, right? And to kind of put the cart before the horse, Blake, Ryan, and myself actually backed out of the highest bid on one of the auctions.
And by backed out,
Yeah.
I pretended like I didn't know
Yeah,
these
they're
guys
like,
so quick. I'm like, huh? Who are these?
I was like, that was not me. And let's do this.
Wrong paddle.
All right.
They're
So
like, what's your number?
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah. They look it all through and say, which number do you want to use? None of them.
We looked at each other and nobody said a word.
Pennies.
But
So here's the story,
give the
right?
story.
Yeah. So the story is that they've got this whole line of auction items, but one of them, it was a bottle of William Blue Weller, a bottle of George T. Stagg, and a barrel of Antique 107. And we're sitting there looking at each other, and Ryan kind of knew about this ahead of time because they did a similar auction not too long ago where that barrel and everything went for about 30 grand. Right. And we already knew, like, well, we're not going to go that high, but we kind of looked at each other and said, like,
what's our max price?
what's our
Ready
max
for this?
price? Like, and like that we could, we could bring more people onto this or whatever it is that makes it, basically like maybe just a little bit less than secondary that we could, help people out and, you can get these bottles. But anyway, I think we said like 15 was like our
15,000
max,
was
right?
our
15 is
yep.
our max. Like after that, we're out. And so it starts going, right? Like off the bat, it's like 1,000, 2,000. And then Ryan's just holding his paddle up.
Doesn't even get up full time.
Doesn't even
He
take it down.
goes, you're in first and second.
Yeah, so they get to about 11,000, 12,000. And then they're going around and they're going 13, anybody want 13, anybody 13. And then I think Fred finally realizes, he goes, oh shit, these guys are the ones bidding on it.
Yeah,
And so
by the grace of God.
Yeah,
These morons didn't read the fine print, apparently.
because what he had to come in, he had to clarify. He goes, this is not for the entire barrel. It's the opportunity to purchase the barrel. So you actually have to buy the extra barrel, which is another, probably 7 to 10,000,
Yeah.
whatever it
But
is.
it did not say that anywhere
No.
in the
In our
booklet.
defense,
I mean,
that was never mentioned.
no,
in any of
it
the
didn't say it before it
material.
went off. It didn't say in the printed material. I mean, it was very misleading.
Yes.
Yeah, that's arguably a very material state,
Yeah.
right? We have an
Well,
attorney
and of
here,
course,
Yeah.
so
thankfully.
we have this we're like, we're out. And so like, but they didn't like hear us or like didn't want to acknowledge that we said we're
They
out.
basically
We said we're out and you were waving your number,
No,
right?
no. I was like, I'm putting my number under my ass. Like, but so then they're like trying to make us feel like, come on, God. I mean, this is all for charity, Like, and I'm like,
right.
I'm like, this is getting really awkward. My heart is pounding. I'm sweating, like panic. And they're like, oh, and then so they're doing 11, and they're like, sold. And they're like,
And we were like, no.
No.
Like, we're like putting our hands across our necks, like, no, retract. Like, we want out of this.
and then
And
like,
then people start swarming our table. They're like, so is there a problem? Like, what?
no.
what should
First
we
they
do?
go, what number do y'all want to use? There's like three of y'all, which one? Or is that what you're all trying to decide? We're like, no, we're
No, no.
we don't get this. We're not buying this.
So I don't think we talked about it. Well, I'm curious, what did it end up going for?
It ended up actually going for, I think,
I don't
6.5.
know. I was so thrown off
All
by
right.
that point. I
know.
So what they do? Just start bidding again?
Well,
Yeah.
they actually they looked
restarted.
at us. They looked at us and they said, "Well, you were the ones bidding. Like, where would you like to start it back from?" And we're like,
Zero.
Like, we're
Zero.
done. Like, we're out of this thing.
Not even
right?
buying it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, it ended up going for 6.5, which in hindsight
still not
probably
a
isn't
bad
probably a
decision.
pretty,
Yeah.
ended up being a
Yeah.
probably
That
pretty
probably
good deal.
equal- Yeah, that's
That makes
only
sense.
a little bit over what you're.
because
Exactly.
you're probably getting about 180 bottles.
Yeah. So it
A lot
actually
of
probably
those.
would have been a pretty good deal
Yeah.
to get it at 6.5. But
yeah,
I don't. At that point, we
Mortified.
felt this A, sense of relief. B, we were like, Fred's gonna talk to us afterwards, and he's gonna be like, "You guys embarrassed me." Like,
we just said, okay, we'll pay $12,000. Just kidding, but we will pay $6,000. You can't retract and then bid again.
Yeah, I
That just
know,
doesn't
right?
look
Well, it's
good
Fred's
in
fault. Before we
general.
walked in, he goes, "Make sure you bid on something."
Yeah, we're trying to-
So
Well,
we
you
sure
did.
yeah. And then I would think the only person that I think that also got maybe the deal of the night was that it was the first Heaven Hill 27 year to actually kind of go out there, right? That's something that's gonna be a $400 retail bottle. Ended up going for $2,200, I think is what it was. And because nobody knows really where that's going to end up right now, like that could be a $1,500 bottle, that could be a $3,000 bottle.
Yep.
So we'll see what the market determines, but I think that person maybe had one of the better takeaways.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't others.
Somebody asked about what other bottles. So there was an Albert Blanton's from, I think it was
52.
52,
Yeah.
which
Albert
was really
himself.
cool.
Picks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then just some other.
And that was 10,000, right?
Yeah, it went for 10,000.
Yeah.
Actually sold to the people that own Jephthah Creed. They bought that one.
Oh, really?
Oh wow.
Mhm.
There was like some Old Forester presidential.
It was the-
Yeah, there's an Old Forester barrel selection.
Yeah, the barrel actually went for 21,000. I believe that went back to the old Forester
Wow.
people.
and a
can't-
bottle of regular old Blanton's went for what?
700 or 800.
700 or 800.
Just a regular bottle of Blanton's.
Yeah, which is
Watch
there
the
were-
prices on Blanton's.
there were a few of those where it's like, I guess they're just doing that to.
It's a tax
There was an
write-off.
Old Weller original from, I think that was the 50s as well. That went.
Yeah, it went for like 5 or 6, didn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And
Is it a
then,
pint or a
yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
that's
but
the pint,
like I
isn't it?
said, I think
Small bottle.
it was fun. I think for anybody, and the auction, the prices are asinine, but it's all for charity. Like it's just an opportunity for people to kind of throw some money around. But I'll say from an entertainment perspective, I loved it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the auctioneer was great.
It was
Yeah.
great.
Fred was great, commenting on each bottle about it,
And it went fast.
Yeah.
Like 37 auctions went in an hour and a half. Like it
Oh,
was
those
fast.
can go so slow sometimes.
Oh, it was
No,
fast.
they
And it
kept
was
it
online
rolling.
too, wasn't it? People could put in bids from
Right.
online.
So they
Yep.
started out with high bids, a lot of those things, except for
Right.
like the Limestone Branch I saw pre-auction was like $100 only.
Yeah. There was
What did that end up going for? Any memory?
I can't remember.
Spend
It
a
was
day-
our table.
spend a day at
More than
Limestone
$100.
Branch.
that
It
was
was
right
$100.
after the Weller, so it's just
Right.
went downhill
It
from
was a
there.
blur after that.
It was so long ago. But anyway, so let's kind of talk a little bit about Bourbon and Beyond, right? I think the highlight, not the highlight, maybe the low light was all the damn weather in the mud,
Yeah,
right?
I
Like
think
that
that's
was
the headline.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
that was the
festival is
unfortunate
weather.
headline.
Yep.
But in regards of, we'll just talk about the bourbon experience, right? Because that's really what we were there for. Music was great for anybody that was just
Lenny
wanting to
Kravitz rocks.
Yeah, I mean, we
Yep.
He was fantastic
great.
live.
so music, there's enough to say about that. But the bourbon stuff, the Bourbon Plus workshops that were going on, I was highly impressed with how well it went down. And kudos to Fred for putting everything together. I
Yeah,
think
he did a great job.
Absolutely.
I
Great
think
job.
it was very professional. Everything was done very, very well. It catered to multiple types of audiences that were there too, because you had some 101 level stuff, and then you had some 201 sort of stuff too. And you got a good mix of the crowd, right? And I think the other cool thing is by the time Ryan went on, because Ryan's session was at 6 p.m., people were a little toasted by then.
Yeah, so my audience was rowdy, and I
Little
was
more
like,
lively.
I loved it. They're like, "Woo!" And I'm like, "Thank you, it's making it so much easier." And I think honestly, I had quite a buzz too when I was going on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm being honest.
Yeah, but he came out and like the crowd's cheering,
Yeah.
like you introduced Marianne, and everybody's going crazy.
Yep.
And then it was almost like everybody had like pockets of fan clubs, right? Because
Oh,
like
yeah.
when John Foster of Smooth Ambler went, you like see all the people in Smooth Ambler in the back like
Yep.
going crazy. So it was fun
And
to
John
see.
Foster, I mean, that was awesome right there. I mean, he was very animated, very outspoken. I mean, that was really cool. I
He's
thought.
a cool guy.
Yeah.
He's a cool guy. He's a nice
Yeah,
guy.
he was direct, very
Yeah, they did
straightforward.
Yeah.
He always
Laid it right out
wasn't,
there.
like, really your typical PR answer.
Yeah, there wasn't a
No,
public
not at all.
relations person there like
There was-
honing
there was
him
no
in.
filter
He was,
on him.
Yeah, that was
no.
unfiltered. He cut right through the bullshit. That
Yeah.
was great. I think from the experience being in the audience and even not just viewing the actual workshops and things like that, but just all these people that are these bourbon stars, bourbon celebrities, people in the industry that you hear about, you read about, you see, you're interacting with. They're just
Which is
regular
great.
people getting a drink with you, type of thing. Which
Yep.
I thought that was a fantastic aspect of the event as well.
Yep. So for those who didn't attend, right? So there was a stage set up. There's two different stages. One just did pure bourbon talks that Kenny and Ryan and Blake and Brian was going to do, and stay moderated these talks, which were awesome. There's another one that incorporated celebrity chefs in bourbon. But then throughout the festival, they had these great activations, right? There's the big bourbon bar with just tons of cool cocktails, tons of master distillers hanging out. You can just grab drinks with them. Jack Daniels had a cool thing. There
They had a
was college
huge
football
tent.
games going on in there. But the moral of the story, there was just so much different bourbon and cocktails and so
Yeah.
many opportunities. To
I couldn't
just-
even make it to 10%
Right.
of it.
Yeah.
Because
It was-
there's
it
so
was
much to offer.
huge.
You're
And we
like-
talked with a ton of fans. We talked with a ton of master distillers. It was a really fun time, right? It was
Yeah.
just if you get a chance to come down next year to this event, please make sure to go do it, because it is, if you like bourbon, it is just awesome. Weather
Yeah.
aside, it was an awesome event.
And
Yeah.
I think even if you're not necessarily into bourbon, it's
there's
something
something
that's
for
kind
everyone.
of for everybody, where you could, not to say avoid the bourbon, but you certainly don't have to
Yeah.
get it all geeky in bourbon to enjoy it. I think that was probably the majority of the people there were
Yeah.
really there just for the entertainment aspect.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yep.
The
Bourbon
lineup
was
was
a-
so good that
a
it's gonna
secondary
draw
Well,
everyone.
thing
I think
that
it's
just-
funny, like in Kenny's seminar, which you did an excellent job, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Bonner.
Appreciate
But they give you samples of each. I think there were some people that sat on the seminar that probably like didn't realize what they were drinking, and they're taking it, they're like, oh gosh, this is like strong.
It's
And there's
a
a lot of,
117 proof
you're
will.
like,
right?
you got
Yeah.
Willets. You got some great whiskeys here. You're
Yep.
laying on the table.
Like,
They were-
I want some a little smoother.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
no, dude, enjoy what you got.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the first session. So what happened was Blake and I were invited to help sit on a session because Jimmy Russell's sister passed away, and so the Russells couldn't make it to it. So they had to do a kind of a stand-in wild turkey tribute, right? And just talking about the whiskey in
They
itself.
dug deep and got Kenny and Blake.
I was gonna say, talk about the ultimate disappointment. You show up to see Jimmy and Eddie Russell, and then it's me and Kenny sitting up there in matching shirts.
But just talking about the whiskey in general, like they were pouring out 17-year Master's Keep. Is that what
17
they?
years master keep they had for us.
Yeah, and that's what they were pouring out. Like it was like you wouldn't necessarily see that. Like you think they're pouring out like 101 or Rare Breed or something, right? But
And
that's
The great thing though with all these sessions was they were free, right? So once you're in the festival, if you wanted to go attend one of these, you totally could, which was great. There's no upcharge, no nothing. So people were lining up, doing a ton of different talks, tasting a ton of different things, which I thought was just great, right? You could really experience a lot for
It
free
was a
once
great
you're there.
setup.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Which that part I didn't even realize until I got there of like, oh, you just line up for
Just
whatever
line
you want
up.
to do and go it.
Yep.
Because like even like some of the food and cocktail things, I'm like, all right, so what do I need to sign up? Like, no, just go on in.
Yeah, first come, first serve.
Like,
Everyone wants to sit.
Dang, this is pretty sweet.
Yeah.
And to that end too, it was first come, first serve though too. So if you wanted to be sitting at tables where there was the wild
samples.
turkey
Gotta
sample,
line up.
you had to be in the first group of whatever it
I
was.
think there were
50.
30 seats.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
About 30 seats. Everyone else would kind of fill in the back. So you did have to get maybe
Well, you had a
I don't
game- you
know,
had a
20,
game
30
plan.
minutes ahead of those to be if the ones you really want to see
Hmm.
and be on top of. But I don't think that bothered anybody.
Nah.
People who were standing in the back, we were in the back, I think, for the majority of them, hanging out with master distillers and people like that.
yeah. I
It was
think
a lot of fun.
there's actually potential for growth there. They could double the size of those
Yeah.
seats.
Easily.
Absolutely.
They'd be
easily.
easily fill them too.
Yeah,
Easily.
they
I
can
wouldn't
make
be
it
surprised
probably
to see that
100
next year.
people, and
It could be
probably
as
get
big
close
as
to-
the chef one,
Right.
The mash stage.
Yeah, yeah.
They had about double the seats, and they were filled, and then you could easily fill the workshop stage too.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Absolutely. So, any other kind of thoughts on Bourbon and Beyond before we I mean, Brian still got his wristband on. I think he still hopes that.
Yeah.
Still
like,
looking
I'm
he's owed-
pretending today
the phone
that,
call's gonna
that I'm
come.
still
Yeah.
there. So I've got my my special wristband on and just wishing I get the call, but I'm not.
Yeah.
So
One
Brian
thing,
missed his session, right? And I was really looking forward to that
So,
session.
Yeah, we
I
were
was
too.
going to do a session on barrel finishing, and we were going to have a great panel of master distillers plus Angry Orchard, because they've got now a product.
Oh,
that
that's
they
right.
are-
Well, we
that
can
they're
act like
aging.
we're the master distiller.
Yeah, so we'll go around.
Let's
yeah.
do it. I call
So-
being the Angry Orchard guy.
Yeah,
I've seen
okay,
his
yeah.
commercials.
So that's definitely the Beyond part of it, and I'd heard secondhand that there was some pushback to having Angry Orchard there as even part of
Interesting.
it. But that's the Beyond part of it, and I think that shows how far bourbon has come.
Yeah.
And it's in every area now, and ciders are now aged in bourbon barrels. So,
Well, give us
I
a
think it's a good
teaser.
sign.
Give us a question you were going to ask. Give us the hardest question that you were going to ask.
well, I was going to ask Wes Henderson if he was really selling bourbon, because I know he's a little
Wow.
he's
Wow.
sensitive to that, because there are some purists who say as soon as you finish a bourbon in a secondary barrel, it's not bourbon anymore, because you can't have any flavoring additives. All you're supposed to have is your first time use charred oak barrel and your yeast and your mash bill and all those things to give the flavor. You can't flavor it with anything else. And there's a lot of purists who say putting staves in it like Maker's 46, or putting it in a brand new barrel, whether it's port like Angel's Envy does a lot, or sherry or whatever else, means it's not bourbon anymore. Now TTB lets you say bourbon finished in.
Yep.
So TTB isn't as much of a stickler as a lot of purists are. But he's a little touchy on that subject. So I wanted to see
a lot of
what he'd
these
say to
guys
that.
are
You're going
touchy
straight
on
for
any-
the. All right, let's make
Going
this
right
fun.
for the jugular.
Wow.
Yeah. I wanted to
All
make it
right.
known.
First question of the day. Welcome,
Yeah.
everyone. And go.
Wes, you don't sell bourbon.
Yeah.
Now, is it fair to have you answer your own question and say, what do you think about how it's labeled,
Yeah.
what the TTB allows?
What, to have Wes answer that?
No, I mean,
No,
Oh,
what's your
yeah.
experience?
No, yeah, I think that's fine. As long as it's transparent. I mean,
Sure.
so as long as you say bourbon finished in, you got to, as long as you disclose that, as long as you don't count the image, the finishing time in your age statement, if you have an age statement, then you're transparent. You're telling consumers exactly what it is that you're selling.
And I
Yeah.
think
And I think
I
that's
think
fine.
I'd rather know that, because
Right.
I think if it's a bourbon finished in versus a whiskey, just whiskey, could be
Right.
anything, malt whiskey, I don't know. I want to know that because I may have at least some idea of what the flavor profile might lean towards, as opposed to kind of just a labeled whiskey.
Right.
Really
Just
no
whiskey.
idea.
You're
Have
just going
to
to call
try
it
it
whiskey.
to
So
know.
it's more transparent to be able to say that you've started with bourbon and then you've finished it in something else. So it's I know Scotch has gone through that issue too, about what they can't put on their bottles anymore.
Mhm.
And it's actually less transparent on some of those Scotch laws. Because of what they can't say. So I like to be able to say it's bourbon finished in whatever kind of barrel it is.
Yeah.
You can't really share any more information.
Yeah,
Right?
there's
That's-
nothing. Yeah,
what
that's
else
what
can
it
I
is.
say?
What else
It's
do you want to know?
exactly what's in the
Exactly.
bottle, and
Yeah.
that's what I'd like to see.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, by the way, I think Wes probably would have been fine. He probably does
yeah.
want the gun, and sure it's not the first time he's gotten
Right.
that one, so I'm sure he'd be doing great.
He'd be fine. Yeah.
Blake, what was your session going to be on today?
So mine was about master distillers. So it was
It was actually the opposite of that. We don't need no masters.
yeah. Well,
Right.
that's yeah, it was basically saying what it was. We don't need no stinking master distillers was the name of it. Talked about the master distiller's role, and it's I've talked to a bunch of master distillers in preparation for this, and usually the answer I get is, what is your role? And it's one day I could be meeting with the investors, the corporate guys. The next day it could be meeting with marketing to plan out new products. And then the third day I could be scrubbing dirt off of off of machinery in the corners. So
Yeah.
it's very broad. It's a little bit of everything. There's not one specific task essentially, but it's kind of like it's bringing the entire production process together. So it would have been really cool. Would have liked to hear from Jim Rutledge a lot. He was on the panel, and then Kava from Rabbit Hole Distilling, and so really
They're
would like
big on
to-
that. That's what they kind of preach, is that we don't need a master distiller, right?
Mhm.
Rabbit hole.
Yeah.
It's more of a team effort than
Yeah,
just one
it is.
person.
Mhm. Just
Right.
respect the process.
And I would agree that it is a team effort at the end of the day. I think you do kind of need that head to kind of lead the
Yeah.
team as well. I think it plays a big role.
I think any
Um,
more master distiller is probably like more of a figurehead, like something that somebody can connect the brand to more than just like, an operations manager, I guess.
Yeah, and that's where it's interesting. In the U.S., we focus more on the master distiller. We're in Canada and Scotland, especially, they focus more on like the master blender, master taster, and the master distiller is not, it's an important role, but it's not how we kind of lift them up, and that's who we send out to tastings and all that.
I mean, you're starting to kind of see that though when you think about like barrel bourbon, right? And think of Tripp, being the master blender versus an actual distiller, and you're starting to see more and more of that come around versus having that could be the figurehead if you want, right?
Yeah,
and kind of make it into the American market.
It's nice to have Rutledge, to have heard him, because he
I haven't heard
fulfilled
from him.
both roles.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, he is a
Very well.
genius at blending with their 10 recipes, but he knew exactly how that his still was fine-tuned, and he was a genius on both ends.
And so that was going to be one of the questions, actually, was whenever he was there, was he essentially both roles and just kind of like the master man at Four Roses, or even though as master distiller, he really did. I mean, I think he had heavy influence. Do they have a master blender at Four Roses?
I mean, I know Brent still takes part in the small batch releases and everything like that. So
it's him. And
it was probably
he's got a panel.
It was. I'm sure when Rutledge was leaving, they're like, okay, we need to put together a job description of what the next person we need to do. So he probably just had to assume
list.
Yeah.
I did ask Brent that how it transitioned. He's like, basically, I do everything I used to do, and just they added some more tasks to it.
And no pay raise.
He told us a story about one of the small batches. I think it might have been Four Roses Limited Edition 2014 that they were really back and forth on. Don't quote me on the exact year, because it may have been a different year. But he kept coming back to Jim with recipes, and Jim kind of was like, no, it's not really there yet. So I guess there was a little bit of a struggle at that point with kind of the agreement on which one it was going to be. But if I remember correctly, it was, Jim really had final say. So it's like, ultimately he's got to be happy with it, right? So in talking with Brent too about coming up with like Elliot's Select, his first, here you're a master distiller and you're going to have to put out a bourbon with your image on it. That's the first thing people are going to recognize you that probably forever.
You put your face on a bottle. That's
put
weird,
your face on a bottle, right? So I remember him talking about how nervous he was about it. That he was between a few different runs of barrels, and do I go this way or that way? So that pressure, ultimately it's got to fall on somebody. Somebody ultimately is going to make that decision. So I think that master distiller, they still lead, they still make the decision, regardless of if they're pulling knobs or whatever they're doing, on the day to day. Ultimately, they are kind of leading that ship, so to speak. So I think that you see that role, whether they're idolized and brought to celebrity and marketing or not.
Marion Barnes actually talked about that in I guess it was Ryan's session yesterday, saying like how much pressure there was about putting together all these releases, and at the end of the day, it does fall on their shoulders a little bit. So maybe I would take a team effort.
They're the ones signing off, right? Yeah, they're the ones signing off.
Wasn't my fault. It was the team's.
Yeah. There's no way to shift the blame to anybody other than yourself, right? So that's
like Rick Pitino, who never takes the blame.
That's fired.
Yeah, really taking one to the gut there for some people. It's all right, but that's actually a pretty good segue into our next subject, talking about master distillers. But before we do that, I want to say first off, shout out to Jane and Larry Rice, Jane Bowie of Maker's Mark, Larry Rice of Silver Dollar, as well as Drew from Willett. Thank you again for joining in my session where we talked about just rare whiskey, which was vintage whiskey and single barrels, and then Ryan had his audacity of source whiskey topic. So hopefully we will get to submit new topics again for next year and be able to bring some more fun discussions. It was really
a lot of fun because we sit around and talk about these, and we have interesting questions amongst us. But usually when we interview master distillers in a traditional setting, you got a PR person, and like there's only so much you can talk about. But here we were kind of like given free reign to do whatever, and it was funny. Like in my session, like how each brand would like defend themselves and like try to like stand above the other people. It was pretty cool.
They try to like skirt their way. Like, this is what we do differently.
Yeah,
right. There's definitely
this is why we're better.
Yeah, for sure.
It was
nice
a dynamic, a little bit of
For sure.
Yeah. And then you had, like you said, their crowd was back there screaming.
They had their fans.
Cool. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Another quick shout out before we move on. I just saw G to the M. So he's from Belgium, watching live for the first time. So welcome to all of our international viewers who can catch us at an earlier time
international
in the day.
viewing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's cool. Well, I mean, it's
all two of you.
2:15 Eastern on a Sunday, right?
Right. What else are you gonna do?
Yeah. Good deal. So this was kind of, like I said, we talked about master distillers, but this kind of leads into a lot of the big news from last week. Like the biggest news from last week, there's almost like two. I don't know if Sazerac came out and said, here's the BTAC list. And then Maker's Mark is like, here, hold my bourbon. Watch this. And so, of course, a lot of the news from BTAC was released, or BTAC. We've had those conversations before. Yeah. We can maybe get to that here in a little bit, but really the topic of conversation was talking about the master distillership that's starting to happen. So Denny Potter, who had been the master distiller at Heaven Hill for almost, I think he's 10 years, maybe just a little bit longer than that. Not even just the master distiller, he was also the director of operations. He had actually worked Maker's Mark prior to that, but he announced, or I think Maker's actually kind of announced for him last week, that he is going to be taking Greg Davis's role as the master distiller at Maker's Mark. Greg Davis is being moved over to somewhere to look at operations at.
It's one of the Beam distilleries.
One of the Beam distilleries, right?
I guess it's Claire or. Is it Boston or Claremont?
Might be.
Well, they
probably should have researched this for.
I want to say Boston. I want to say Boston.
Somebody watching
Boston.
I think the Booker No plant, the one in Boston or Claremont, and then Frankfurt's
which is Boston.
I think Boston.
Right,
Yeah, so
Boston.
maybe it is Boston.
Yeah.
Okay.
Boston,
Anyway.
Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Right.
Austin, Massachusetts.
So anyway, everybody's getting promoted around here, right? That's kind of seems what be happening. So I kind of want to push. I have a little bit of an inside view into this, and kind of know some of the reasons why he went over. But another reason why I kind of look at this too is that he might have been pigeonholed over at Heaven Hill, right? Like there's not. It's a family company.
Yeah.
He probably hit the highest in the echelon he could probably get, right? So he probably made a pretty good move by being able to go to a company that's global. I know a lot of people were looking at it and be like, why would somebody make a lateral move? And maybe in some people's minds, they're like, that might even be like maybe just a step down to go from director of operations just to something that's master distiller. However, I don't necessarily see it like that, because we were talking about earlier, right? They're public figures, they're faces. And one thing Denny has always done very well is he can talk, right? And he knows his shit, right? So he's very good at both those things. But I kind of want to get your all's take on, moving over. Was it a good move? Is anybody going to sit here and say like he probably should have stayed? Like, what are your all's thoughts?
Here's my thought, and this is purely speculation. And like, I don't know, I thought about this because I thought the same thing. Yes, it's a bigger company, bigger stage, but I think the way Heaven Hill has just been operating the past couple of years, I think maybe they might be getting ready to package to sell it soon. I don't know, purely speculation, and maybe that had something to do with it. He kind of saw that on the horizon, but I don't know.
Because he heard it here first.
He didn't.
Wow.
I'm just
purely speculation here first.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife works there. I don't see any stock options that come in, right? There's no ownership except from the family, right? So who knows? They could be looking.
I mean,
for
it's no bigger time than now for their brand and bourbon right now. So I mean, who knows?
We really haven't seen another massive acquisition like that in a long time. I mean, who would have been the last Makers? The last
Beam when they got.
But they were been private for a while, or I guess the Suntory would have been.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, Beam Suntory. That was
that's true. I didn't think about that. But ultimately, I mean, I think time will tell. But Heaven Hill, they're kind of a funny one. I feel like they're doing a lot recently, but in a lot of ways, they still seem a little bit behind the 8 ball on like things like social media. Like I think they got a Twitter account 2 months ago or something.
That's true.
And
That's true.
So I don't know. Who knows what actually happens behind there? Heaven Hill still produces a ton of great bourbon. But I mean, we've all kind of dealt with them on like media side and everything. And I feel like for the first 3 years of Bourbon, I could never get a hold of anyone over there.
Yeah, that's true.
And then all of a sudden you get one person, and I understand that for the smaller companies, but for the second largest producer of bourbon, or maybe they're
still second. Beam.
The second largest producer
storage
of bourbon. You kind of would think they'd have some of that other stuff set up. So, I mean, it's a big win for Maker's Mark. Denny. He really knows his stuff. If you've ever listened to the Bourbon Pursuit podcast where he talks about everything, but no, so I think it'll be good. It'll be interesting to see who fills his role at Heaven Hill now. So we can speculate on that as well.
Yeah.
I put my resume in, haven't heard back yet.
Yeah.
So,
Still pending.
yeah, still pending.
I will say, and I don't know if this is just a personal feeling for what I feel like I'm subjected to in terms of marketing and that kind of thing from the big Kentucky distillers, but I feel like both Maker's Mark and Heaven Hill are two that I don't really feel like the master distiller is put forward as a face as much as, say, I mean, the big one is of course Wild Turkey with the Russells,
Right.
Yeah.
You know, labels, name,
Well, 'cause
very
Maker's
much
Mark,
in
they're
that.
just like a plug and play. Like we've been doing the same thing.
Yes.
Consistency. Like
Very-
no
very
matter who
good
it is,
marketing.
it's
Well,
going to be
very
the.
And they've
clean
had
marketing.
distillers come and go that
They
people
have.
They
don't
do.
really
That you're like, oh,
realize.
wait, I didn't even realize that
Yep.
that was a distiller there not
Yep.
that long ago.
Right.
You know, that person. So that's interesting that maybe there's going to be a shift at that in this point. Maybe we'll see more of a, hey, we're highlighting,
Yeah,
you
instead
know,
of the same
Denny
hills,
instead
maybe
of
do
just
the-
you know, here's bottles doing fancy things on social media. We might see something change a little bit there.
Now, what's everyone's thoughts about Makers being the one of the or the best known weeded bourbon, and Heaven Hill having challenges with their weeded bourbons?
That's an interesting take. I mean, I will say that one of the best weeded whiskeys that I had was Parker's
Right.
a few years ago.
Weeded,
right?
yeah,
Absolutely.
weeded whiskey.
That was a weeded
Yep.
whiskey.
The 13-year
Mhm.
weeded whiskey.
And
That
you
was
are right when it
fantastic.
comes to a bourbon, they really don't shine, right? Because
Right.
you've got Bernheim, which is still a weeded whiskey. It's not it's not a bourbon,
Right.
right?
Then
you
you've
know,
got Larceny.
yes.
And you've got what, other than the decanter series, you've got Old Fitzgerald, which is, you know, what is it, $12? I mean, it's bottom shelf whiskey now.
I think people like Larceny though.
Yeah,
I mean,
Yeah,
people are
Larceny
often
is a
saying,
brand
yes,
for
Larceny is something you
Larceny has
should
a
try. It's a
following.
good alternative. It's under $30 usually.
They've got a lot of marketing budget
Right.
behind it too.
They
So
do.
it does
Yep.
hit a very
Yep.
wide audience. And plus the the bottle design and everything when they launched that just a few years ago, right? That it was
Right.
that was sort of their way that they're trying to tackle a younger market too.
Mhm.
Yep.
Right.
And I think move away from Old Fitzgerald.
Oh,
at that
yeah.
time.
Yeah, for
Right.
sure.
Yeah.
That
Right.
was the idea.
For sure.
But Makers is so iconic though.
Right.
You know, it's hard to everybody when you think of bourbon, you know, who doesn't
Yeah.
oh, Maker's Mark, you know, even people that don't know bourbon,
And it has
they
a
know Maker's Mark.
yeah, strong international presence too,
Right.
right? Which is
Yeah.
what you don't have with Heaven Hill products. You
Because
know,
I'll
I mean,
tell people from out, I'll be like, they'll ask me about bourbon. I'm like, if you can find like Evan Williams 17, they're like, what? What is that?
Yeah.
And I'm like, you haven't heard of that? And they're like, Makers, you know, they totally
That's
know
it.
Makers
Yeah.
and like Knob Creek, you know,
Yeah.
that's those big
they can
brands
find it.
that-
You can
yeah.
tell anyone in the world.
Makers was smart to trademark that trip.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
all I
Yeah,
can
they're-
say is that
Absolutely.
very smart to do
Yeah.
that.
Do you mention that in
Absolutely.
Bourbon Justice, by the way?
It might be in there.
Oh,
No.
Little teaser.
Yeah,
Little
it was funny.
teaser. Find out on November
That or
1st.
more.
It was funny at that
That's right.
auction, Julian, you know, had a wax top and he was like, yeah, I dipped this wax, but I made sure there was no drip.
Yeah.
Good.
So the other thing that I like about Denny going over to Makers is I think that next time we have him on the podcast, he can actually be a little bit more of himself. So anybody that's actually talked to Denny or knows Denny, he is going to fit very well in with the No family because he cusses a lot, right? And every single time that we've ever interviewed over there, like there's always a PR person in the room. So it's kind of like he had somebody over his shoulder,
Yeah.
right? Like Vegan Show always said the same, which is
It's the
fair.
refined version.
Which is fair, right?
Yep.
It's understandable. However, I think going over to this side of the house where you know how the No's act, I don't think that
Bill Samuels is
he doesn't have to really hold back.
legendary stories
Yeah.
himself.
Yeah.
and
Exactly.
that
Right.
kind of stuff.
So he's not really have to hold back, right? But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. I am certain that we're going to find out news here in the next week or two of what's going to happen to Heaven Hill because I'm sure that
They need somebody there.
Can't leave that hole open long.
Yeah.
well, I
Yeah.
mean, the thing is that, we've had the opportunity to go and visit Bernheim and they've got a lot of people. We've talked about it before, right? Like it's more or less a face of the brand.
Yeah.
The amount
There's
of time that
people
they're
in
actually,
operations that they're doing just fine.
They-
without a
yeah,
master distiller.
there's somebody else doing 95% of the work already, right?
Yeah.
So it's more or less the face of the brand, the marketing engine behind it. Maybe something that is a talking head when you go and you got to go across the country and push your whiskey, right? So they'll find somebody, but I think we could speculate all day and figure out what it is. Who just knows what is going to fit that Heaven Hill mold.
Right.
I think what's surprising to me though too is it shows the passion Denny has for just making bourbon for the masses, right, and for the mass level. Because he could have easily went independent, right? He could have become a consultant, started up a ton of different brands, and just went for it for a money play.
The next day
Right.
pick roll.
He could
right?
be, yeah, exactly. And he didn't. He went, back to an iconic brand. He's going to build that and continue to build it. And I think that says a lot about his character too, and like where he wants bourbon to go and what he's really into. So it'll be interesting.
Maybe get more vacation days out of it.
Well,
too.
that might be the case too.
Yeah.
401k.
Yeah.
I mean, he evaluated all
You got
those
5 more days.
benefits look like.
And what's interesting, I mean, to piggyback on what I mentioned earlier, if you don't have that person as your icon, that's something that if they leave and people don't notice, it's much less of a hit versus, I mean, obviously we all remember when Jim Rutledge, retired.
Right. When you put all your
from
chips
Four Roses,
with one
and
guy.
everybody
Yep.
kind of like, it was this, okay, did they do something wrong? Was there wrongdoing? Why is there not a celebration bottle with his name on it? All the kind of speculation that went on out there. I think Four Roses really went on. I mean, defense and then offense. Okay, Brent Elliott, let's get him out there. Let's make this play. Let's get a bottle with his image on it. So you're kind of vulnerable in that case. If the master distiller isn't, part owner really and have some control there, you're going to have that risk.
Right.
Which even is the more interesting part is like Four Roses more than probably Heaven Hill, that when you think about it, like you're not going to touch a drop that Brent has had anything to do with within this role for at least a little bit, right? Like this is all sort of the Rutledge era that everybody's still consuming, right? So you still got a little bit of
Aside from blending.
let's be honest, everything's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
But it's just like something to just.
But if you
yeah,
want to
but-
start stocking up on the Rutledge whiskey, you might
how
want
long-
to.
how
But the
has
thing
Brent-
is, Brent's
been
he's
there
just
for a
doing a
while.
recipe that's been
That's
there
true.
for
Yeah,
years.
10
Yeah.
He's
Yes.
just
Brent's he's been
and
there a
then
long time.
I was just saying in that particular
in
role.
that
Yeah,
role,
that
you're
role.
right.
In
But
that
he was
role,
always
yes.
on the tasting panels for the
Exactly.
limited editions, small batches. So
Yeah.
he'd been working with Jim on those things.
He's not a
hand in
newcomer.
hand. Right.
And quality control.
But
right?
distilling
You're
to me is
quality
the
control.
easy part. I mean, it's an exact science. It's like a formula that you just do. The blending and putting it all together. That's where
That's
I think
an
the
art.
true magic.
Right.
That's an art.
is.
Mhm.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about maybe this blend we have on the table here, because I think this is something that it's a treat, and I am going to let Brian do the honors of talking about it,
Okay.
and then if he feels fortunate enough that he actually wants to open this after this conversation, then we will.
I
pressure,
think we'll
but-
definitely be open it. But so what was it, about 2 months ago or so on one of these episodes? We were talking about the Sazerac versus Castle and Key case, and we had Castle and Key was sued by Sazerac because Castle and Key owns what's historically known as the Old Taylor Distillery in Millville, Kentucky, and Marianne was able to mention that yesterday at Ryan's workshop because Castle and Key won the lawsuit. Castle and Key is now allowed to keep up the sign that says Old Taylor Distillery Company above the door. They're able to talk about the decades of history that Colonel Taylor had at that property. This is the property where he got the Bottled and Bond Act passed. This is the property where he created the Old Taylor brand. That's famous. He had spent some earlier time at the OFC, which is the property now where Buffalo Trace is. And Buffalo Trace, Sazerac bought the brand name from Jim Beam. So they own the Old Taylor brand. They, of course, have the much more popular Colonel E.H. Taylor small batch and single barrel. And they didn't want, they didn't like Old Taylor also being in Millville, I think is what it boils down to. So what I said a few weeks ago or a few months ago is that if the case wasn't appealed by now, by the time everyone was in for Bourbon and Beyond, we would be able to enjoy, and I don't know if it can be seen on
Hold that up close to that camera.
How close can I get to
The one to the
camera?
right, to the one, both, I guess.
Yeah,
Or
I
show.
can do both. but-
So if we, it's got a little bit of glare on there, but if you can see the tax strip, this is a distilled in the fall of 1916,
Wow.
Old Taylor, and then bottled in 1933. So this would have been, people know more or less when Prohibition started, but what's not as well known is that distillation stopped before Prohibition came along because of the war, and distilleries were being converted into making alcohol for the war effort, not for drinking, but for use in the war effort. I don't know exactly what it was used for, but it's really hardcore.
Some kind of fuel. I think,
alcohol
was the concept.
Right. So distillation stopped before Prohibition. So this is going to be one of the last distillation runs by Colonel Taylor at the Old Taylor Distillery. And I was fortunate enough to get this bottle. It came in a box. Since it was sold, well, you could only have medicinal spirits. This is the maximum size you could be sold in. This is, you see at the bottom, it's the American Medicinal Spirits Company. They were a company that started as from the Wathen family, and they bought up a lot of stored aged whiskey, and they were able to sell it as medicinal whiskey throughout Prohibition. So I've got the box. It's a full pint. It's 100 proof, bottled in bond, because of course that's what Colonel Taylor fought for. And I thought we'd be able to enjoy this at the Roundtable.
Wow,
that's great.
Hey, that's a treat. I'll let you do the honors, and
I'll turn the mic off, and you guys.
We'll talk about it here for a second.
When I woke up this morning, I didn't think I was gonna be drinking again.
But you know,
but I'm glad I am.
Funny how that changes.
Yeah,
we were all gonna leave today, but then this came up. So.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Blake was actually at the airport.
this is a true story. This is a very
he
true
was
story.
actually at the airport. He was trying to bail out on us early, and then Brian sends a message. He was like, "Hey, I'm gonna bring this," and he's like, "Well, I'm on standby. I guess I'll come by."
my standby got mysteriously canceled.
Yeah,
and,
right. But
So here's the streak continues.
So I think here's the other thing why this is a big treat, right? So yesterday, for anybody that was there at my rare whiskey talk, did anybody else catch that when I had asked them? We were talking about vintage and dusty whiskeys, and it came up twice when I asked both Larry Rice. I think Drew as well. Drew as
he
well.
said a 1950 version of Old Taylor.
It was a 1940 or 1950, something like that. But Larry said his favorite was like 1910 or 1908 or 1916, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Right. So I think this is pretty much a treat for all of us to be able to do this, because I don't think it would have happened any other time unless they're gonna go and pay for
astronomical amounts.
at Jack Rose or something like that.
What's
right?
Made it harder to open
What's-
in 1910.
What's amazing about this bottle is the fill level is fantastic too for a bottle that's been out.
Yes,
almost 100 years.
You guys that have bought the old ones, talk about the shoulder fill level and what you're looking for.
Well, I haven't really been bought a whole
I
lot
haven't
of
bought any of these.
I haven't bought a lot of pre-pro stuff, so you might have to
Are
get
you
your,
just saying like
get your microphone.
But in terms
if
of
it's
it's-
above the shoulder,
Here we go. Yeah, get back on so people can understand this.
Yeah, so if you're looking for a true dusty, a pre-prohibition or prohibition era bottle, what the guys mentioned about the fill levels, usually you'd be up higher than the shoulders, and this one is right about at the shoulders. If it's lower than this, chances are it's going to be oxidized and is going to have a sort of wet cardboard taste to it, meaning that the bourbon evaporated out, and that's going to be replaced with something, and that's going to be oxygen, and that's going to change your bourbon over time. You also don't know how a lot of these bottles have been stored. If they've been stored in an attic where it's hot, that's going to change it. If they're stored in the sunlight, that's going to change it. So you're taking a lot of risks when you're buying an old bottle. And the oldest one that I've had before this one was at a KDA event for a Bourbon Affair, where the Samuels family had found a bottle of T.W. Samuels, the old family brand, and they made a big to-do about it. The whole thing was at one of their houses, and they had it all set up. They had someone with practically white gloves on opening the bottle and pouring it for everybody, and it was awful. It was one of the worst things that we'd ever
I think
done.
Zane was
Now,
talking
did they
about
admit to
that
that too?
Yes,
Oh,
everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody.
She's like, it tastes like shit.
Yeah, as soon as everybody tastes, you start looking around the room, and everybody's like, "Oh, "That's really bad." And
So there was a reason and a methodology behind the idea that Bill Samuels Sr. actually, or his dad or whatever, actually tore up the family
right, he
recipe.
burned it. They say
and,
that's part
and
of the
made
legend.
a new one, right?
Right. Well, it's that, and I think it turned. I mean, it probably wasn't that bad in whatever I forget how old it was. It probably wasn't that bad,
Mhm.
but that's an example of one that over 100 years had turned. It oxidized, and it had that wet cardboard taste, and was awful. It was probably the worst whiskey I've ever had of any age, of any time frame.
And then
Hopefully this is not
oxidation
the
too.
case.
I mean, if you look at the amount of air in there, bottles have air in them. if they're sealed, well, there's only so much oxygen.
Right.
You know, it's only going to interact so much.
Right.
Depending to how much you might move the bottle around, that kind of a thing. But if it's got that free flow of air, you're constantly replacing it with the new oxygen,
Right.
which is going to
kill
can
your
cause that basically. So your reliance on your cork, of course, is very, very strong. You've heard those stories of people who, just the cork, apparently just shriveled up and
Right. You've got
dried out, and
Yep.
those, because you don't store bourbon on its side either, like wine.
That's a great point.
Right. So one thing I've noticed is that when I'm looking at, I actually had a bottle of 1792 and it was empty and I had stuffed the cork in it. I came back to it about a year later. As I do some things with bottles, use them as art pieces and things like that. And
This is
the
in
cork
1918. Is that what it is?
the cork was completely loose.
1918. Is that what it is?
Completely came loose. So the lack of
Still
the liquid in there caused that.
The cork came completely out.
Cork was the cork was just completely shrunken, and I just pulled it up and just came it out.
There it goes.
The cork broke.
So it was.
I got my finger on the.
Oh, jeez.
Oh gosh. All right. So we need to go get a Band-Aid.
We'll be fine on that.
Okay.
So,
If you want to, Ryan, how about here? You hold the phone.
Yeah.
We're doing Facebook Live at the same exact time.
we'll work on getting the cork out.
I'll get a cork and some.
But a good sign on the cork breaking
Just the very tip
is
of the top.
is
so
it's
that's good.
just the tip that is
Yep.
that is broken off, and by being stuck in there, I think that should mean that we got a good seal.
I think that's a good seal
So I think that's a good sign rather than the cork
because there's definitely
falling
been,
apart and falling into the bottle.
if you think of not even super old, but turkey bottles of the late 70s, early 80s, which are notorious for the cork breaking. Those corks break like
Oh yeah, the old crows are like that too.
Right, yeah.
The Chessman's. Oh,
Nice there.
there's a knife.
Yeah, I mean, because that was a little bit of glue that was connecting the cork with
yeah. I think you're gonna be okay, Brian.
that top there. So that certainly degraded over time. Degraded.
Well, in the meantime,
Yeah.
what should we talk about?
Let's go through any other questions.
Any other
So I
questions
saw
from the-
Robert. So Robert, I posted a picture on Instagram of one of the bottles that went for auction, and one of them was one of the Van Winkle. How they did those gift things, and it said Don Johnson. He's like, pretty sure that's the actor.
yeah.
Like, pretty sure it's not. He's like, nope,
Yep.
nope, definitely the actor.
I like Joshua Smith's idea. So drill a hole through the cork and throw a straw in it. So he would, but with straws being outlawed, it's just we probably shouldn't.
yeah, you're
For
not.
the environment, we're not going to bring the straws out.
We'll just chug it straight from the bottle instead, Joshua.
So what did y'all? So I guess from the Bourbon Beyond, one thing that I left excited about was like all these newer distilleries and like some of the products that because we don't always like give them the time of day or like
Yeah.
they're there and they have awesome setups and you kind of get one-on-one with the distiller and the team going on and what they got plans and that I'm really excited about the future of whiskey after last night. I mean,
100%.
like I was talking to you about it and I was like, this has got me really excited.
Yep.
Not these Dusties, not these vintage whizzes,
Yep.
these
But
new
the new
guys
stuff.
coming up. Yeah.
There's so many more distilleries now pumping out large, like it's not a
And they got
1-2
some age
barrel
on
a
them now,
day. Yeah, it's I picked 2 barrels while I was up here from New Riff out of it's right by Cincinnati, but what city are they actually in Kentucky?
Newport
Covington.
I think it is.
or Covington? No, it's a Newport.
No.
Yeah.
I think it is
Whatever.
Newport.
They're all
Um,
meshed together up
that's
there.
all
But
the
anyway,
same
so
to us.
they're pumping out a lot of whiskey. This bourbon it's just under 4 years. It'll be 4 years when it gets bottled. And I think everybody here's tried it. And
It's tasty.
it was
It's really
really
tasty.
good stuff. And we're to that point now where it's like, hey, this is just good bourbon. It's not for a craft guy. It's not bad.
Yeah, it's good for a cocktail.
ooh.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
That's why we brought the tweezers.
All right, good. That's loose. So it's a fragile cork.
So he said it's a fragile cork. So
It didn't fall in though. It looks like it's still in the neck,
Yeah, that's good.
but broken in a couple pieces.
well, good thing
Oh,
is
okay, you got the tweezers.
this is
How good were you at the game of Operation?
I know. I was about to
Yeah.
say that.
oh yeah.
So we had one of the questions up on the screen by David.
This is like a
Area.
paleontologist.
So what's the oldest bottle each
Testing
of you
off
have drank
fossils.
before this?
What's that?
That was a question. What's the oldest bottle each of us have taken a drink from before this?
So I had one that was with Fred, and we were coming out of the Legend series, and I forget what it was, but he just pulled it out of his suitcase. I couldn't even remember exactly what it was, but he was like, "It's pre-prohibition. Here you go. It's not good." We all tasted it. We're like, "No, it's not good." But that had to been, it was like 1920s or 1930s, something like that. I couldn't even tell you what the brand name was.
Yeah, I had I had the same experience. I had a pre-prohibition with Bill Thomas, and it was so bad. Like, I don't even want to remember it. You know,
doing a glass or something.
It's pretty firm in there.
Yeah, it's so the cork is it's not pushed down into the liquid yet, but it's pretty firm there, and there's not enough room to get the tweezers on the other side.
Suggestion would
Just push
probably
it
be
through.
push it through and filter it out pretty
Filter it
quick.
out.
Yeah,
You got to
You got a
do a
decanter
setup?
that I can put it
yeah,
in.
I got
Kenny's
glasses.
got
Let me get it
everything.
for you real
All right,
quick.
let's decant
This
it.
is riveting.
It's like opening
all
Al
of Bourbon
Capone's
or
vault.
Eats
Yeah.
appliances.
Yeah.
He's
Break
got
out
something for this.
Yeah. That's my suggestion, is because otherwise you probably need to get like the pins and put them in there and try to get enough, or
So-
toothpicks, but toothpicks will probably break
So,
it up.
Brian, somebody wanted to know, where did you find this bottle?
This was from a friend.
From a friend.
From a
That's-
friend. From a friend.
From a friend of a friend.
So, real quick,
Yeah.
Joshua Smith. I know we'll go back and talk about what we drank, but will the festival happen again next year? It will happen next year, and they've already announced it's going to be 3 days long versus 2.
and they announced another one that they're going to do. It's like a country music one also.
Yeah.
Oh, it's gonna be a totally separate festival.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, it's going to be
gotcha.
a separate
So,
with a bourbon
yeah.
influence also.
3 days of 3 days of Bourbon Beyond next year. So that's more bourbon, more music, hopefully less rain.
Yeah.
And I think it's gonna be pretty good. But back to the question, Blake, what's the
Yeah,
oldest bottle?
The oldest, I think it was 1912, but it was 1918, 1912.
Okay.
Tasted, had very heavy notes of mothball and dustiness. Yeah, some of them, I've had some that are from like the 30s and 40s that are really good,
Yeah.
but I feel like anything that I've had pre-prohibition, and I haven't had a ton of it, just probably 2 or 3 times, it's always been that really dusty taste.
Yeah.
And Eric, I'm taking the entire family to Disney next weekend, so that's part of my my pass for this week. And this is work, I've been doing
There you
work up here. I don't know why people
Well,
think
speaking
this
of
is,
larceny,
just fun
It's
stuff.
back.
This
Oh,
is-
you guys
This is
did that
technically
totally
a
quick.
business trip.
Totally.
Yeah, this is a business trip.
Yeah.
So everybody,
Cork
hate to
is still
disappoint you. We're actually just going to crack some larceny to
Yeah.
celebrate
Right.
this.
We switched the bottle when no one was looking. No, so we poured it in the cleaned out larceny bottle. You see, it's got great color.
That is
and
great
we were
color,
watching
yeah.
pretty closely, and there was no loose cork that went into it. So we've just got the cork in the bottle of the old.
well
Taylor
done,
bottle.
guys.
Which is a good sign
Well
too,
done.
because it
Right.
Yeah,
tells you
that is a good
cork
sign.
stayed pretty well together there in the neck.
Yep.
Well, here's the moment of truth,
Yep.
right? Let's
See what it tastes like.
we're
Cross your
we're
fingers and-
here.
I'm nervous.
Hopefully
Yeah.
it's not wet and burnt.
Yeah. So I'll wrap it up real quick while Brian pours it out. I think the oldest bottle I had was a 1940s bonded bottle. It was good, but I can't imagine it's going to be anywhere close as good as what we're about to sip on. What about you, Nick?
I don't have too much experience with older vintage bottles. I live in Syracuse, New York. Something we really don't see, I think, up there too often. I want to say I've had some old Taylors that have been, 60s, 70s. I believe was it an Old Crow?
Oh, man.
We had a
Last
72
night
or
it
73
was-
old Crow.
I
that
think it was
phenomenal.
1973. That was very good. That definitely resonated with me. How good that
Well,
was.
if the nose is
Yeah,
indicative
so
of
just
anything-
Brian, thank you so much for doing this.
Initially, you
Well-
don't get that dustiness, that that mothballing
nice nose,
oldness.
yeah.
That is a
You don't get any funk on that.
Oh,
that's
man.
pure cherries and
I can smell
caramel
that
and
all
brown
day.
sugar.
Yeah, you're right. The brown sugar especially is.
Got a great color to it too.
Yeah.
It's
Old 17 years,
17 years of stored in Millville. It's a great brown color.
This is delicious.
I just realized.
I keep smelling this.
Well, I actually went in and sniffed the microphone. I was like, which one do I have in my
Oh,
hand?
that's really
That
nice.
nose
That's
is
how-
well.
This one survived.
This one
So-
held
one's-
together.
Wow. I mean, that's
That is delicious.
and
That's
there's still
spectacular
some
flavor.
finish. I took a sip 20 seconds ago. And
Oh,
it's
this is a
still,
nice long finish.
still there, but it's not a robust.
You can taste the bonded, the proof, the 100 proof.
I didn't know that was a thing. I could taste the bond.
Taste the bondedness.
Hey,
Taste the bond.
Oh my god! Can we that our new T-shirt?
yep.
I can taste the bondedness.
These things just come. I don't know.
So
They just come out of my mouth. I don't know what
they flow out. I don't know what it is.
The finish is still going, but it's a flavor finish, not a heat robust kind of. Some of those finishes, like an overproof Booker's 25th or something. I think the finish is so good because of the strength and how robust the whiskey is. And
I mean,
it's
that's
more of a
just-
burn. This is a flavor finish.
Yeah,
That
this
is.
like,
It's flavor throughout the entire sip. Great nose, great palate, phenomenal finish.
Because there's a little bit of the oak, a little bit of the mineraliness on the finish, but it's still has a good
like
sweetness
raisins, a
and
lot-
fruit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. It's a lot of dried
See,
fruit.
Yeah.
Ryan's
A lot
calling
of-
out dried fruit right
Yep.
now.
Yep.
We have
bondness.
this thing has
Bondness.
evolved.
Wow, this is
Yeah, it's like a really nice raisin brand.
Man,
The best larceny I think I've ever had.
right.
Yeah.
We just proved that larceny is better than Makers.
Yeah.
Evan
Yeah,
Hill is kind of
this-
right.
They did something right.
No, I'd say it's a good daily sipper though. So we'll be over tomorrow.
ISO.
yeah. Time to cancel your next flight, right?
Yeah.
So we're gonna wrap this up here. So I want to just kind of get in the middle and say
Mm.
cheers, everybody.
Cheers, everyone.
cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian.
This
Yeah,
was
Thank you very
this
much.
was an exciting opportunity that we all got to come together and do
Yeah.
this. B, that Brian was able to bring this and share it with us, because I think this is a true once in a lifetime kind of
Yeah.
opportunity.
And
right?
100%.
That is a
100%.
once in a lifetime.
And I couldn't highly recommend people either come to an event like this or like Bourbon Fest or just
Talk about
something.
Kenny's basement.
Well, yeah.
You definitely come to Kenny's.
I always send every time somebody, I'm like, let's go rate Kenny's bar. But just couldn't, recommend more to come to Kentucky or just any bourbon event and hang out with, the community. Like, I mean, we joke we're internet friends. Our wives think we're all crazy. But it's just great to, meet these people. And then like we met a lot of our listeners at the show and like we're so appreciative and like it was so cool. Like, they're like, "You're Ryan." I'm like, "What?
What I do? Yeah.
Where's my wife? She's got
I
to hear
saw
this.
you on. I saw you on the internet.
But it's just, we all have this common thing of bourbon, but we meet so many great people, and it's such a blessing, like to be able to experience that.
Yeah,
something
it's
like
a great
this,
way to put it.
and it's
Yep.
really cool. So I couldn't highly recommend coming to something like this and get involved with it.
Maybe there'll be a roundtable experience coming up
Yeah.
at another bourbon event soon. We'll see. I don't want to tease that
Take
out
this
just
one,
yet.
apply for a
Sean,
tent.
take the show on the road.
That's
Heard
what
it
we were
here
talking
first.
yesterday.
We got plenty of '90s rap music.
Yeah.
Because Blake was saying yesterday, he was like, we should dream big. What if we just had like our own tent for Bourbon Beyond next
Nice.
year?
I like
Right?
it.
Yeah, I was like,
Why not?
We'd have to
Why?
charge extra.
Yeah.
Old
Yeah,
Taylor.
I'm gonna need-
Taylor on
I need
tap.
cash only and small bills, please.
But we typically go around and everybody says their goodbyes on where you can find everybody. But everybody knows Breaking Bourbon, bourbon.com, Sipping Corn, and make sure you give one more plug for your book when they can find it.
November 1st, Bourbon Justice, and it's on pre-order right now. And I saw it's on 33% discount. So order up, buy two. That way you can keep one on
Yeah,
the shelf. And
Christmas
it can
gifts are coming
increase-
up.
No,
Christmas
I'm
is
saying-
here, so why not just
Value
get multiple?
Yeah,
increase.
secondary value.
That first
increase.
edition
Once
is-
you
yeah.
open your book, it decreases in value.
So buy two.
So you need a second one
Yep.
to put on the shelf and
That's
display.
So you can
Yep.
flip it.
And
You gotta
maybe
flip it later. Yeah, there you go. Absolutely. So guys, thanks again. This is a fun weekend, fun experience. Hopefully next year we can make 2 days out of it. Who knows if we
I don't know if we can handle 2 days.
2 out of 3. That's
Well,
a
yeah,
better
next
percentage.
year,
Yeah.
exactly.
yeah.
Well, let's see if Fred invites us again. So let's say thanks to Fred.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
might got
Thanks,
blackballed.
Fred.
Thanks,
We
Fred.
might got
Alright.
blackballed after Friday night.
All right. Well, cheers, everyone. And make sure you follow Bourbon Pursuit on all those great places, as well as these guys. And we'll see everybody next week.
Thank you.
Cheers,
Thank
Thanks,
you,
guys.
Thanks for
Cheers.
watching.
All right. Cool. We can kill it now. Yeah.
This is nice.
This is
very.
This mic's still live, I think.
We got very lucky.
this is actually better than what I was expecting.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you.
as bad as that
How's that?
TW Samuels was.